research. I guess you could call it that. Yeah, so the point of these, this is the first like new format of a Wellness Wednesday, and it comes from 3 years of every Wednesday running a weekly call and giving a message. I kind of thought that a discussion format would be a little bit better. I think as we slowly like integrate it into the group, more people will show up, is the goal. But ultimately, no matter who shows up, the real goal is just to kind of get some things out. I think that talking through things is always going to be better than just kind of like listening to something and taking it in. So the goal really is just to kind of discuss some of these feelings that might come up every week. Some weeks I might send a TED talk, some weeks I might send a message, but I want to be able to give you something to kind of reflect on. So let's talk first about the actual reframes that I sent in. Like, did anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I think that bottom one as like kind of a follow-up on our conversation. So it was a really good exercise for me. That was the one, like,
it all seems really overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just seeing something is better than nothing. All I really need to do is operate as the person that I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I kind of wrote these based on what I'm working through too. I think that's important to mention for you, for anybody listening, is like, I struggle with these things too. And I think it can be helpful even to write something like this for yourself based on what you're struggling with. Really, I just started with what are the thoughts that I'm having that like, I feel like I know better, but I'm still having and experiencing these thoughts. That's where I got the initial list, and then just writing the reframes for myself was helpful. So all of these spoke to me this week because it's what I'm personally feeling. And even if I don't get trapped in it, it's still important to recognize that that little thought is being run by somebody outside of like the version of me that I want to become. And just being able to identify those thoughts in my mind. So it's cool that, you know, it resonates with anybody, because it's what I'm personally dealing with. The second thing I want to go over is just the assignment, because I did one for myself too. So that helps to get me out of that narrow tunnel vision of where I am and all the things I have to go through. It kind of helps to start from on the outside, having been through it, looking back. And so when we think about the way that, well, first I want to hear kind of what that was like for you, and any takeaways you might have gotten.
Yeah. So I felt like I just kind of focused in on, you're taking these steps. Eventually, it's a journey. It will get you somewhere. Just kind of focus on, let me kind of get it. So there were a couple things that came up that I thought were, oops, sorry, Olivia.
You're okay.
Good ways to frame it. Oh, I don't know. My cursive is so crazy when I write in these. It's like, what am I saying right here?
It's okay.
But just, yeah, I think just, reminding myself to take those baby steps, have patience, keep up the breath work. I do kind of want to go back to this because one thing I kind of started at the end and I ran out of time was bringing up like some of the changes I'm already seeing. And so like focus on that and not necessarily like, here's this hot mess that I have. Here are all the things that I haven't done, but like, here are some of the things that have been coming up. Man, there was one thing in particular, but anyways,
it'll come to you.
Intentional steps.
When it comes back, share it, because yeah, what you said alone is interesting enough, right? It's like, once we sign up to this idea that like, this is just work I'm going to do forever, then it becomes easier to step away from the list of everything that there is to do. It's almost a relief when you can process and deeply understand that like, it's never going to be done.
Right. Yeah.
Because it becomes a lot more easy or efficient to then look for evidence of progress. And okay, what's working for me right now? What's working is breathing. What's working is getting my face in sunlight every day. What's working is just hitting the paper whenever I feel like I'm blocked up. And kind of hyper focusing on like, these are the things that are working for me. And so I'm just going to keep doing them, and everything else will keep working itself out. And as I keep doing these things, I can maybe add to them, but focusing on that list of, okay, well, now I've just opened a whole nother can of worms, and this is all this shit spewed out that I start tackling. It's like that laundry list, that to-do list is never going to get smaller. So focusing on that is just focusing on the problem.
Yeah.
So, I agree. This exercise can be one of those things that when you get kind of buried in the I'm not doing enough, or how do I do it all? It's important to just kind of like come out of that and see like, okay, this is what I'm doing. Like, that's it. It's just focusing on what I'm doing and not all of the things I need to do. And because that's just never, that list is just always going to be running on its own. And it's not for me to start to chip away at. It's more about just letting things come to me as I'm ready and continuing to do the things that work, and that's enough. Yeah. So with that, where do you feel like, because I kind of like part of this being on a weekend, the same thing with the Triggered series being on a Sunday evening, is like, these are things that I want you to take into the next week or take into the season that you're in, or be able to use practically day to day as you need them. So like, maybe it may be helpful to identify either like what are the common scenarios that put me in this state of feeling this way, not necessarily to avoid them, but you hear me say a lot as a coach, prepare versus prevent. Like, I'm never in a space of trying to prevent something from happening. It's always going to happen. No matter how healthy I get, there will always be work to do. No matter how good I get at managing my triggers, people will always trigger me. It's not about preventing something stressful from coming into my life, but understanding what those stressful things are. That way I just know going into it how I'm going to need to respond. And so when I'm thinking about this time of year specifically, the reason this is coming up is because like this sense of overwhelm or things that need to be done, doesn't go away this time of year, especially. And so going into this season, and personally, it might be that you just moved, or that you have family in town, or that you have to go on a bunch of trips, or just the time of year that feels like a cleansing process. Like this time of year every year feels very much of like a shedding of skin for me every year this time of year. And so whether it's something like broad in general or something very specific with what's going on in your life, I think it's important to realize not just how to get out of the feeling, which is what the assignment does, but also how to kind of look for the feeling and prepare for the feeling so that it cuts that learning curve. So it's like, now you've gone through the muck of like, this is what it feels like to feel buried, and this is how I get out of it. But now moving forward, knowing what I know now, how can I actually just spot the patterns of like, when I get into these types of situations, or when I start having these conversations, or when I'm thinking about being around these types of people, I start to get in my head. And that way, instead of preventing it altogether, I just know what to look for instead of being caught underneath it all and then clawing my way out. I've done that once. I don't have to do it that way ever again. Now I can start to look for the commonalities in my life that play out these patterns or that trigger these feelings. And I can start to just let them come to me and say like, okay, it's that time of year again, line up, let's handle this, right? And I feel like I can go into it more equipped, to know that this is going to cause these feelings. And when it comes, this is what I'm going to do to work it through, instead of having that dysfunctional in the middle feeling of feeling caught and then needing to get out. And so that's kind of my thought looking back, reflecting on the assignment, is how can you now use it as a tool going into your week, your month, the rest of your year? How can we look at these reframes and say, okay, what actually gets me to the before feeling? So if you're looking at that flow chart, and maybe I'll mirror it, like that was the before feeling, and then the arrow into the reframe. What puts me in this feeling before I need to even reframe? And so that's what I would be being curious about. That's where we come back to like the curious observation of like, where are my thoughts going that get me here? Or like who's around me that gets me to that point, or what things come up on my list that make me feel like I can't do all of this. And starting to look out for those causal thoughts, triggers, actions, things that put you in that place altogether, so that you can start just short circuiting it to the reframe, right? So that when I get around these people, or when we start having these conversations, I can actually go straight to the reframe. But I can't do that unless I know what causes the thought to begin with. So
That's awesome.
It's more of an open-ended, right? Like it's a big seed plant. I don't expect any like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. But I do think that's worth like doing a little digging in that area.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because in doing the assignment, that's not where my mind went. It went to, well, let me reassure myself that, you're doing it. But I hadn't thought to take that further step back.
And that's part of what I hope will come from these calls. The assignment is the prelim to get you in the place for like the growth, right? If you look at it that way, it's like you've done the assignment. That was the point to prepare you for this call. And then this call gives you the tools that you need to connect the two. That was kind of my goal. So yeah, like I don't think it's something that we naturally look for, but it is a added bonus of doing an assignment like that with yourself, is that now you can see. It's like, I want to explain why I set it up that way, but it's kind of hard to explain. But maybe the best way is like, for me at least, I really have to convince myself, because of how many versions of me are in here and at war with myself. Like I really want to make sure that the best version of me is steering the ship. And I can't do that without understanding like what the outcome is going to be. So doing an assignment like this kind of out of order helps me see there is a light on the other side. We do get to the other end of this. Now in my regular life, I know that taking the high road or doing the reframe in the moment is going to get me to the other side. And so having that evidence of an assignment like this, seeing what it feels like and looks like to be on the other side of that conflict, now I can apply it preemptively to things that might trigger me or have me in this overwhelmed state. I know that I can get to the other side pretty easily. So that would be kind of the leaving piece of this assignment, would be like the follow-up is just do some investigating on like what gets you in that space in the first place, so that you can start to, again, short circuit or like cut the learning curve between skipping over that mucky feeling and going straight from the trigger into the reframe, and being able to connect the two.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that that's a good place, honestly, Claire, like that's kind of the whole point of these, is to be short and sweet and give you something to think about going into the weekend. So unless you have other questions or thoughts about that, I think that's kind of like where we should leave it.
Little golden nugget from Olivia.
That's the point of these Saturday mornings and Sunday evenings during this season. That's kind of the goal. So
awesome. Cheers, lady. Thank
cheers.
you.
Mine's being refilled, hopefully.
Enjoy your Saturday.
You too. Have a great day.
Bye.